Hello folks, Hard Officer Zac here. Welcome to part 1 of Roguelike RETROspectives. In this video, we will be covering what we are fairly certain is the first example of roguelike gameplay on a consumer game console. And that console is the Intellivision.
Introducing Intellivision, the new home video system from Mattel Electronics.
I'm sure some of you who watched part 0 of this series, we'll include a link in the description, are thinking,
Zac, wait! Stop! You said you'd be focusing on the Japanese game industry, and Intellivision was never released there.
And I wouldn't blame you. I thought the same. But it turns out the system did receive a limited distribution on this side of the Pacific. Mattel marketed the system in Japan through Bandai starting in 1982 for the exorbitant price of 49,800 yen, about $600 US, accounting for inflation at the time of this video's release. And this was a year before the Famicom released at about a third of that price. Hardware and software were also just North American versions, either given new Japanese packaging or with Japanese instructions included in the American packaging, so it's probably safe to say that the Intellivision in Japan was a case of poor marketing and distribution and didn't do terribly well. Today, Japanese Intellivisions are so rare they're often used only for display, if they even come into a store here at all. And if you can find one a store is willing to part with, it will likely cost the equivalent of several $100s. The Intellivision apparently received 22 releases in Japan, mostly a well-balanced library, although a little heavy on sports and board game titles. The titles we'll be discussing over the next few episodes of Retrospectives did not receive Japanese releases, but Intellivisions are region-free, so they can be played regardless of which hardware you own. And now that we have some info on Intellivision's presence in Japan out of the way, let's move on to the game itself. The earliest console game we could find that resembles a roguelike is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Cloudy Mountain, released for the Intellivision by Mattel Electronics in 1982.
Hey, this is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
Originally titled just Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, it was given the subtitle Cloudy Mountain after the fact to distinguish it from subsequent D&D Intellivision games.
So don't be surprised if the dragon finds you first. Holy cats, you just killed the dragon. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
Though far from a true roguelike by the Berlin interpretation, it is, at its core, an action-adventure game. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Cloudy Mountain's use of randomly generated dungeons revealed as the player explores, and an overhead view makes it feel aesthetically similar to a roguelike, so we consider it relevant in our exploration of how the roguelike genre found its place on game consoles. Cloudy Mountain was designed by Tom Lowry, who also worked on titles including Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit, a couple early 90s PGA Tour games, and even N64's Beetle Adventure Racing. Lowry felt similarly to the designers of the original Rogue about randomness in games, that surprise was a key element in creating an enjoyable game experience. The game consists, in short, of exploring multiple randomly generated dungeons of varying difficulties to obtain items that allow access to new areas of the overworld map, eventually reaching the final dungeon where 2 parts of a crown are guarded by 2 winged dragons. Defeat the dragons and get both parts of the crown to beat the game. Cloudy Mountain offers 4 difficulties, chosen by which button you push on the controller at the title screen. After that, you are immediately brought to the overworld map, 3 dots resting at a house represent your 3 adventures and also your 3 lives. There are a few varieties of mountains, which at first are only 2 colors: brown, which are impassable, and black, which contain the game's roguelike style caves. Approaching black mountains reveals one of 4 colors, each representing a different difficulty with different items guarded by monsters within. However, all mountain varieties contain quivers that boost your stock of arrows. Gray mountains are easy and only contain the ubiquitous arrow quivers. Blue are medium and contain a boat that lets you cross rivers. Red are medium hard and contain an axe that lets you traverse forests. And last, purple are hard and contain a key that lets you open gates. Walk over a mountain to enter it, and you are presented with a maze-like cave, where you can fight or avoid monsters, obtain the item within, or don't. With the exception of arrows, once you obtain an item, it never goes away, and there are multiple mountains that contain the same items all over the overworld. And find the exit, also guarded by a powerful monster. Once you exit a mountain, it cannot be re-entered for a short time, so getting the items you need to progress on the first time entering a dungeon of a specific difficulty can be crucial to progressing early in the game. In caves, the only weapon is your arrows, which can be fired in 8 directions using the Intellivision controller's numpad and will bounce off walls. What I feel are surprisingly complex physics for a game of this time period. This feature is invaluable, especially in higher difficulties, as the game uses some ingenious sound-based gameplay mechanics where certain monsters will snore if they're asleep, or roar, and so on. This is true of enemies that are in areas of the map that have yet to be explored as well, and therefore can't be seen, so using the sound design to one's advantage is a core gameplay element. There are also footprints and bones that indicate a monster is nearby, and the sound and visual cues of each monster are different. So even as simple as this game looks, it legitimately can feel like an animal tracking sim at times. Arrows may also bounce back and damage you, so it can be a little nerve-wracking to make a decision between tossing one of your valuable arrows into the darkness and hoping it ends up hitting a monster and not you, or pushing on to save resources at the risk of ending up with a dragon or demon right in front of your face. By the way, checking your arrow stock also uses sound. Press the Count Arrow button, and you'll hear a succession of beeps indicating how many arrows you have left. It can get pretty ridiculous in the easier modes, where one quiver item holds as much as 11 arrows, and you can end up with 50 or more in stock. There are various enemies, including bats, which do no damage, but their wing flapping sound makes it hard to distinguish other sounds. Blobs, which move very slowly but are impenetrable to your arrows. Spiders, which can steal your arrows. And various boss-like monsters, such as rats, dragons, demons, and snakes. And, of course, the winged dragons in the final mountain, which are the toughest adversary of all. Every monster acts differently and takes a different number of arrows to kill, so learning how to use sound and visual clues to identify what kind of beast is waiting around the next corner is an integral part of progressing through this game. These elements, and managing one's limited number of arrows if you choose one of the higher difficulties, lend the game a stealth or survival horror-esque aesthetic. Truly amazing for a game from before even the Famicom was released. Overall, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Cloudy Mountain is a game that makes excellent use of the Intellivision's limited hardware and offers lots of replay value. If I were to throw out one criticism, it's that the caves can be a little disorienting. They actually loop at the edges, like a maze laid out on a sphere. So trying to remember where that exit you just saw can take a little wandering. It's also quite short for one session. While recording footage for this video, I was easily able to beat Cloudy Mountain in under 15 minutes. But learning how to approach each monster type and attempting higher difficulties or quicker completion times makes for a rewarding experience regardless. I highly recommend giving this game a shot. As a side note, there was a Famicom game released in 1989 called Dragon Buster 2 that, while not confirmed, has to have been heavily influenced by Cloudy Mountain. It closely imitates too many elements to be otherwise. However, it drifts even further from the roguelike formula by removing dungeon randomization. The layouts are exactly the same every time. It technically offers a greater variety of items, but they're limited to era upgrades and time-limited power-ups, so it doesn't get anywhere near the level of depth offered by typical roguelikes. That's not true of Cloudy Mountain either, though. If Dragon Buster 2 has also imitated the dungeon randomization, it would have been a very nice Famicom homage to Cloudy Mountain. Still, first-time players of Dragon Buster 2 will get an experience similar to its Intellivision inspiration. Next time on Roguelike Retrospectives, we examine another D&D Intellivision game designed by Tom Lowry, this time in the format of a first-person dungeon crawler. We hope you love what you saw here. If you did, feel free to subscribe, tell us in the comments, give us a like, and check out our other videos where we explore used game shops in Japan, and very soon we'll be releasing videos on other Japanese games and tech as well. Don't miss it. Thanks for watching.